I'd like to share a love story with you today. And it has to do with a boy and a girl. It starts with the boy and a girl. And they didn't know each other. They met in a grocery store. And they were on the dessert aisle, walking along the aisle, and they each stopped in front of the section where they sold jello. And which was curious, and he said, "What are you looking for?" She said, "I'm looking for lemon jello. What about you?" "That's astonishing. I'm also looking for lemon jello." And so they thought, well, we have something in common. And so they decided to chat with each other because they were both single. And when you're single, sometimes you're on the lookout, for potential mates. So they sat down, they had an espresso, and they struck off a good conversation. They were interested in each other, and they decided to go out on a date and then another date, and before you knew it, they fell in love. And they decided to get married. Now, but this time they were both working and going every morning. They'd go off to work. But the night before, they always made jello to take to work and have it for lunch. And so you can tell they were like maybe traditionalists. They were not taking candy bars or anything like that. They were just taking something traditional like jello. And so they decided to get married, and they did. And they found a nice little apartment and set up house and did everything that a young couple would do. And then after a while, they started talking about a child, whether they would have a boy or a girl. And he said, "Well, what do you want?" "Oh, well, boy or girl, I don't know." And they were indiscriminate, but they were determined to have a child. And well, there's no manual for this, but they kind of figured it out, and they kept trying, and they were getting frustrated. And then one night, the magic happened, and they woke up the next morning, and something felt different in the house, and they walked over to the refrigerator and opened the door to the refrigerator, and there was a little boy inside the refrigerator. And he looked at them and said, "Hi, Mom and Dad." Well, he was verbal right from the get-go. He was also made out of jello. Well, they were not expecting a child made out of jello, but they were very pleased because he was gregarious, he was fun to be around, and of course he had to stay in the refrigerator. Because we all know what happens if you leave jello out. And they didn't seem to be surprised that he was made out of jello, but most people would be. But he turned out to be a fun-loving little boy, and not only curious, but very energetic, and he explored that refrigerator, and he looked at all the little jars in there. There was the one that, and he figured out the letters. You may may think he was precocious. He was. He learned how to read very quickly, and he figured out that the J-A-M spells jam, and other kinds of things. Took him a while to figure out mayonnaise, but that was a harder word. Anyway, so he taught himself to read, and but he was somewhat confined in the refrigerator, and he wanted a bigger life. Oh, and by the way, this dahlia here is known as the ring of fire dahlia. And this was a gift from these two guys, and Jan and Ken, and their mom, Annie, who is has been here longer in the cottages than anyone else. And the people that have, is that my alarm? No. Okay.
I thought I turned my phone off.
Oh. Well, anyway, The Ring of Fire, besides being the title of a song by Johnny Cash, is actually a very, very beautiful dahlia, and it's apropos for this story because it is a love story, and that's what that song is about. I fell into a ring of fire. And so I've tried to grow dahlias, but I've never been as successful as these guys. And so it is a beauty. And the heart of it is yellow, which is apropos for this story, which has to do with lemon jello. And the edges of it are deep red, which is apropos for love and romance. So it's the perfect flower. Anyway, getting back to what did they call their son? And they couldn't call him Bob or anything, so they called him the little yellow jello fellow. It's a mouthful. But where are you? They never had to say, where are you, little yellow jello fellow? Because he's always in the refrigerator. Well, they didn't know that the little yellow jello fellow had his own dreams, and that's what they had before he was conceived, because they had dreams and wishes, and they wondered what their child would be like, whether it would be a boy or a girl, and so forth. And now they had this little boy, and they didn't realize that he had his own wishes and dreams. And what he really wanted was to live someplace else. He wanted to live outside the refrigerator. And so he didn't complain about it, but in his heart of hearts, that's what he was looking for. And well, his parents thought he was quite happy, because what else could he want? He didn't eat much. They gave him lots of exercise equipment. Had little monkey bars inside the refrigerator, and then he would swing from one part of the what would you call them? You know, any fixture in there, he would hang on, and he was just like, you'd say, hyperactive. And so one night, and I was saying, they thought he was completely happy. And one night they woke up and they walked downstairs because they'd forgotten something. And they heard him singing inside the refrigerator. And they said, "Isn't that cute?" So they tiptoed up to the refrigerator. And this is what he was singing. If I was a real boy, not made of yellow jello, but a real boy, all day long I'd go outside and play. If I was a real boy, I'd go to school with my friends, I'd go to birthday parties, I'd sleep in a real bed every night, I'd read real books and listen to the radio. And they kept hearing him talk about the life that he wanted and the life that he didn't have. And they tiptoed away and they walked up the stairs and they closed the bedroom door and they started to cry because they knew that the little yellow jello fellow would never be a real boy. Don't worry. So, like most parents, they were troubled, but they knew they couldn't do much. And so they, as he was reading more and more, he was getting interested in adventure books and comic books and books about ninja warriors and Robin and Batman and all kinds of action figures. And that's what he visualized for himself, that he was going to be some kind of a hero, an action hero. And so they said, well, we can make you a little outfit. And so they made him an outfit with a cape, and gave him a sword made out of inside of a ballpoint pen. And so he had the sword, a spear really, and so he visualized all kinds of fights that he would get into. But the likelihood of getting into a fight inside a refrigerator was quite unlikely. Well, one night, his parents were sound asleep, and there was a strange noise at the kitchen window, like a tree branch scraping across the window. And he said, well, what could that be? And then he heard the noise coming from another window. What could that be? And then the back door. And then he realized they were robbers trying to get into this house. So he sprang into action. He put on his adventure outfit. He got his sword. And he grabbed a stick of butter. And he jumped out of the refrigerator and started slicing off little squares of butter all over the kitchen floor. And it was completely buttery. And he climbed back into the refrigerator. And then he waited. And then he could hear one of the windows being pushed up. And these two voices inside, these two men, were inside the kitchen, right outside the refrigerator. And when one was saying to the head robber, whose name was Ralph, Ralph, you always know how to break into these houses. How do you do it? Well, he says, they always locked their doors, but they never locked their kitchen windows. I always sneak in the kitchen window. Remember that. So they're in the kitchen. It's kind of dark. Ralph and Louis. Louis was a kind of robber who was always hungry. So he says, Ralph, why don't we have something to eat before we rob this house? Because I'm kind of hungry. And he says, okay. Why don't you look in the refrigerator and I'll look up here on the shelves. So he goes over, Louis goes over to the refrigerator door and he opens it up. And he says, you're not going to believe this. There's this little, I don't know, dessert made out of jello in there that looks like a action figure. Well, take a bite. So he reaches in to grab the little action figure made out of jello, and all of a sudden the action figure springs out of the refrigerator with his sword and starts poking him in the nose and in his chin and up his nose and so forth. And he's like, holy Christ, what's going on? And he just starts to panic and he falls onto the floor, slipping on the butter, and he falls against his buddy. And it's completely dark. They start punching each other. And the little yellow jello feller is there, and he just is astonished. And all of a sudden, they knock each other out, the two robbers. And the mother and father hear this commotion. They come running down the stairs. And they turn on the lights and say, oh my, what's going on? Who are these guys? And they look at their son and say, do you know anything about this? He said, well, I do, yes. And then the husband says to the wife, well, call the police, honey. So she calls the police. And the dad ties up the robbers, and the police come and they look at the little creature, the little yellow jellyfish, say, did you do this? Well, I helped. Yeah, I did. And then they cart the robbers away, take them to the jail, and the parents are there. I won't. The parents are there and they say, we are so proud of you. We are so proud of you. We never imagined that you could do something like this. I mean, you have superhuman abilities. Oh, I just tried. Well, right in that moment, the magic happened. And that little boy was transformed into the real boy that he's always wanted to be. And there he was, a 7-year-old with blonde hair. And he said, look, I have hair. And a real nose. And he was overjoyed, and the parents like, oh my gosh, we're looking at a miracle. So, I'm going to tell you how this story turns out, because they decided not to call him the little yellow jellyfish anymore. Mm-hmm. I think they called him Jim or Bob, something like that. And then he started going to school with other kids and going to birthday parties just like he wanted, and started getting bigger. And the parents were, to use an old-fashioned word, flabbergasted of what had happened to their little boy, and that how he had been completely transformed. You'd have to say he had to take a lot of credit for it, because he was ingenious and quick on his feet, quick with his tongue, and a quick thinker. And so then that little boy grew up, and You look around the room, not that many men here, but you know, he could have had a blonde hair, might have turned brown. Anyway, he grew into a nice looking boy. They gave him a real American name. And then, I suppose, well, let's call him Johnny. He got married and started his life. And when his wife said, well, what was your life like when you were growing up? Oh, probably just like yours. But he never wanted to tell them where he really came from. But it doesn't matter where we really come from. It's where we go, where we develop. And so this is the story of the little yellow jello fellow.